Hello everybody, this is Dave from Double Edge Racing, and I am one of the team drivers for TeknoRC as well. This is the first in the series of techniques, tricks, and build tips for the Tekno ET48.3. I will of course cover some of the things that will be going and important for all of the vehicles, such as the way we build diffs, which is the first here. So what you see in front of me is some of the basics that you're probably going to want. You're of course going to need bag A. All of the bags are nice, neat, and easily labeled and in order in the box. And you're going to want a couple pieces of tools. In this case, I'm using the Tekno 2.0 hex driver because the 2.0 screws are in the bag for this. I'll also be using my driver with a 2.0 MIP on it. And also important though is the rest of your workspace. I like to have something like just a generic old beat up towel that can absorb things if they spill when I'm working on things like diffs or shocks. And you also want a couple places to be able to put things like screws and other hardware. So quickly, what I'm going to be doing here is, you can see there's two option parts sitting out here that I'm going to be putting on. One is going to be this. It's the standard spur gear, the TeknoRC. The only difference between this and the black spur gear that is going to come in the kit is this one doesn't have the black dye in it, so it's going to make it a little bit easier for you to see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to just go ahead and set that aside. The second option part that you're going to see that I'm working with is going to be this. This is TekR5149A. These are the aluminum cross braces for the Tekno diffs. The first thing that's going to be important, and a lot of people do these in different orders, but first thing is you're going to have to make sure that your bearings are going to go right on the outsides of your diffs. This is going to be important on both sides. You notice that they do stick fairly well. Every once in a while you'll get one that will come off fairly easily, but normally they'll stay on pretty well. This one falling off a little easier because this is a metal piece instead of the composite piece. So I'm still going to do this, but we'll make sure that we leave that on, because if we put the outdrive in without the bearing on, we're going to have to take the whole thing apart. So let's go ahead and leave that over there. And the first part, Tekno does include all of the fluids and greases and such that you'll need in the package. So here is the first bit, and this is how you're going to want to treat your particular surface. Now there's two things that we want to do here with the black grease. The first is we're going to want to get this tiny little edge in here with a nice little ring of black grease in the corners. The reason is because this is where we're going to be putting the O-ring that's going to prevent any of the oil and fluid from going out, and we need to make sure there's a good seal there. The second place that we're going to be doing the same thing is right on this groove here. So in the out drives, you're just going to fill up this groove, and it is important that you have enough grease on here. It is not a problem to overfill it slightly, but you do want enough grease on it and all the way around. So you'll notice that I'm going to do this, and yep, there's a tiny bit extra in there, and I'm just going to run that up the shaft a little bit. That is perfectly fine. It's not going to harm anything. What we might end up with later on is a little bit of grease sticking out the edge here, but that's not going to cause any kind of problems other than a little grease fling off the first time we run it. Now there's a lot of different ways that people like to do this. I like to just go ahead and stick it right in and not worry about the O-ring just yet. So now I have my diff set up here. I'll take the O-ring, and we've already got grease down in there, so I'm going to go ahead and take the O-ring and slide it right down on top. And I'm just going to take the grease and push this down into place, right down into that area. And now you'll notice as this is pretty much set, it still looks clean. So now we want to go ahead and put another layer of grease around it because we want to seal the whole thing. So we're going to put grease on the outside and that inside edge. And now nothing's going to be coming in or out of there because it's all nice and sealed up with the O-ring and the grease. I'm just going to put a very light layer of black grease here, and this is where that seal is going to go. And this is going to help make sure that nothing is going to get through the seal, and it's going to seal up very well. So simply by having this very light and even layer pretty much everywhere, now I'm going to take the seal, and here's another little trick for you. We want to make sure that it goes on even because we don't want to change it next time. So just go ahead and stick it right on your driver. Stick your driver in one of the holes, and that'll guarantee that it's going to be lined up as soon as you get it in place. Now you can just push it down and you have your seal in place. Now, just like I did the white gear below, I'm going to do the same thing with the grease on the seal here, because that's going to be getting in touch with the diff cup, and we want this to be sealed well too. And again, this doesn't take a whole lot. You just want a little bit to make sure that it's going to be sealed all the way around. So you can see how that's sitting. Now this is ready to have the shim put on, and that's basically all we have to worry about here. I'm going to take my needle nose and I'll put in the one little cross pin, and this is ready. I'm purposely not putting the sun gear in because we're actually going to put that onto the cup before we finish. Now, as we go on here, I'll go ahead and leave that off. I want to take a quick look here. Hopefully you can see this at the diff cup. Now, Tekno does have very good quality parts all the time, but you will notice on this particular diff cup there is just a little bit of flashing right around this hole. This probably would not cause a problem, but since I'm inspecting and noticing this, I'm just going to take my X-Acto and take off that tiny little bit of flashing around the hole. This is not going to cut into the edges at all. I'm not doing any of that. I'm simply taking off some of that flashing so that it won't cause a lump in that section and possibly a leak later on. There we go. That should pretty much take care of that. So, now that we have the diff cup taken care of, we're going to do exactly the same thing with the grease in here, the out drives, and all of that. So now that we have this all seated in here, we'll just go ahead and take the other pin. And what you're going to notice when you look at the out drives is that the notches are going to face the same direction as the holes. So I'm just going to line the hole up with one of these edges so that I can put the pin all the way in. We just drop it in place. And so now it's in place, and we just slide it through. So now that our pin is in place, we are ready with this diff cup to go ahead and drop the sun gear in. So take one of these sun gears, drop it in place. So there's the basis of our diff. So we've got the cup, the top, and a bunch of gears sitting in here. So the next step is going to be to take our fluid. In this case with the center diff, we're going to be using 10K, which is the stock out of the package. I'm mostly going to be building this to the stock specs, though with some upgraded parts. And so this is, I'm going to put just a little bit of fluid in here. And this is more the Ryan Lutz method, where he likes to put stuff in ahead of time, so there's less to worry about as far as waiting for the air bubbles to come out of it. And that is more beneficial the higher weight your oil is. With something like the 5K or 3K or even the 7K that we typically use in short course and e-buggy, that doesn't help a ton. But as you can see here, even with it in early, it still hasn't gone all the way down in those cracks just yet. So if you were to start filling this only once everything was in, it would take a very long time to settle. Though there's nothing wrong with that. It will work perfectly fine. It's just not going to work quite as fast as in this case. So now that we've got the base sitting in here, now I'm going to go ahead and start putting in the next stuff. So we're going to take the cross pin and keep this standing up. I'm going to take the cross pin, just hang on to it, and again just inspect the gears. Every once in a while something will happen. If you notice it now, you can just tell Tekno, send them a picture, and they will replace it, but that's almost never a problem. This, on the other hand, is a little bit tight. This is okay to be a little bit tight. It's going to wear in and break in on your first diff use. If you are someone who's been watching Ryan Lutz's tips, you'll know that he will take this off, and he uses X-Actos and blades for just about everything. I would rather use something like a body reamer, though of course you are going to be using metal on metal for this with any case, so that's going to wear quite a bit quickly if you do it a lot. But I'm just going to take these, check them for fitment, and they're both a little bit tight, so I'm going to go ahead and actually do the Lutz method, except I'm going to use a really cheap and already beat up blade. And you just kind of spin it once or twice on the edges, because it's basically the anodizing and the burrs from, sorry, not the anodizing, but basically the burrs from the process of the forging that can sometimes get in there. And this is going to free that all up and make it not a problem anymore. And again, as you just saw, it doesn't take much of anything in order to do this. So on go the gears. And you can see that this is facing up. It's important because these are cross pins. The other one will come across it. So the first one is going to go in with that facing up. And it just drops right into place. Make sure that these are seated up against the wall and that this is all the way down. And that's all you're going to have to worry about with that. And we're going to do exactly the same thing with the other cross pin, except upside down, so that the notched out portions will go across each other. So those go on, we drop it in, spread out the gears so it can properly seat all the way down, and now we're just going to fill it up again with fluid. Now I like to start filling the fluid in these corners here so that I get fluid behind the little spider gears. And again, not incredibly required, but it does make it much easier and shorter to make sure that you have fluid everywhere you need it. Now just start in the bottom here, fill up that fluid, and at this point we basically have a diff full of fluid. I'm filling up just about to where the top of the gears are, and a tiny bit more. Now at this point we want to make sure that everything does move correctly. Don't do this quickly. If you do this quickly, it's just going to lift the gears up and pull air down underneath into the fluid, and then you're just going to have to wait. But by doing this just a little bit, we make sure that it is moving correctly, but B, we also will move any air bubbles that were trapped between the gears to the top, as you can see over here. And so that will work its way out very shortly. But while it's sitting there, the next step is to take our other sun gear and drop it in place. Now there's a lot of ways that you can go about doing this. I personally like to make sure that my cross pins match where the holes are, because I will line up the other piece later to make this super easy. So I'm going to drop that in place, push it in, and you basically want your diff fluid to be completely flush. You don't want excess on top, and you don't want too little. And so this is just about perfect for me. And again, I'm going to turn this just a little bit so that those are lined up really perfectly. And with that sitting there, we are now good for the last part. And so here's the other tip. When you do this, just turn it, line everything up with the holes, take your trusty driver and just stick it all the way through. And now you will always get this perfect every time. Just stick it right in the hole and let this drop. And as you push this down into place, it's going to line up correctly each time. And you just press, and that diff gear is going to sit right over the top of the cup every single time. So now that we have this perfectly in place, and you can see that just by going straight through and looking through, you can see through the gear, through the seal, and down through the screw hole. There's nothing there. I'm not sure if you can see that very well in the camera, but it's important because you can just look all the way through, and that's how you know everything is lined up perfectly. So now I'm just going to take some screws, start them up, and I like to start and finish these by hand just so that you're not overdoing anything and you know that you're getting a straight shot to start with. And just like with anything else that's rotating, you want to do the star pattern as close as you can. In this case there's only 4, so you're just going to alternate back and forth on the sides. And then I'm going to take my driver. Now that everything is started, and use that to put this down into place. And again, I'm not going quite all the way in. It's just to make my life easier rather than to put it all the way in. Now you could go ahead and squeeze the trigger a lot more and put it in there quite more quickly. I recommend against doing that because as you go really fast with a screw, especially the first time on the plastic, you're going to heat the whole thing up, and so that can cause a little bit more of a strip likely in the future, or to make it a little bit more malleable, and we don't want that in something like a diff. So again, I don't have those all the way in. I'm just starting everything and getting them into place so that I'll be able to then tighten it by hand nice and neatly for all 4. Now when I do this, I also like to leave it with the clutch on the weakest setting, because that's basically going to guarantee, at least with this particular driver, that I can't over tighten any screw. So that's a really nice feature to have if you're looking for any driver. Make sure you have a good clutch on there so that you can't overdo anything. Now that that's in, I'm just going to finish snugging everything up by hand. Now it is important to note that these are supposed to be snug, they are not supposed to be super tight. Once it goes in, you're going to feel a spot where it basically bottoms out and it doesn't want to turn a whole lot more. Don't worry about going past that point. You don't need to. It is very important not to go too far, because if you go too far, you might actually bind the diff up. But more importantly, If you go too far, you'll actually start to warp the plastic spur gear, and you really don't want to do that, because then you'll have this wobble in there that may even rub things as your vehicle is going around the track. And that will very quickly add heat and lose performance. And there you go. That is how to do a diff. Nice, easy, and the same every single time you build it. A nice and smooth diff. Thank you for watching. This is Dave from Double Edge Racing, and we hope to see you again next time.